Thank you for joining me on today's episode in the 172nd Air Wing channel. Today we have for review something slick, shiny, and cool. Today's review is about the F-22 Raptor in the, as far as publicly known anyways, experimental chrome mirror finish as flown by the 422nd Test and Evaluation Squadron in November of 2021. I do remember when the F-22 first flew and it hit the blogosphere a little bit because the aviation journalists were kind of ping-ponging off of each other, speculating on what this finish really means, whether it's kind of high technology is being tested. And apparently the finish is being tested as part of an Air Force effort to optimize technologies for the upcoming 6th generation NGAD project, not to be confused with the Navy's NGAD project with the same acronym. So what's NGAD? What's that about? Well, the NGAD program is a 6th generation project which is meant to build an air superiority fighter that will replace the F-22 that you see depicted in front of you in 1/72nd scale. Now, the idea of the NGAD is instead of it being just one airplane that's supposed to be better than the F-22, it's going to be that airplane plus a cooperative family of autonomous drones / UAVs, which will act as digital wingmen for the airplane, and they'll of course be AI driven and controlled, but they will fly to support the NGAD aircraft. So we are really getting into some ace combat level technology here, folks. Those of you that have played that game know that drones and UAVs play a role in that storyline, and it looks like the Air Force is dedicated to making science fiction a science reality. And part of that effort is testing technologies that are going to be relevant when that project is released, which at this point is targeted for the 2030s. So with it being 2023 at the time of this video, we're actually coming up pretty close on that date. So I don't know about you all, but I'm interested in seeing what the final product is going to be. So the idea behind this coating is it's supposed to be a next generation finish that's going to be on the NGAD. And interestingly enough, many of the 6th generation proposals and concept drawings from Lockheed Martin, who builds the F-22, show a similar silver finish. So the Air Force has, for obvious reasons, not publicly confirmed what this finish is for. So people have basically been forced to somewhat speculate, and seeing as how I don't have anything else to go on in terms of facts here, so I'm going to join the speculation party. Let me know what you all think in the comments what the finish could be. Because the Air Force doesn't spend money making a chromed F-22 for no reason. So I'm curious to think of what you all think of what those reasons might be. My hunch, my total unscientific, casual research shot in the dark guy on the sideline to guess, is that the coating is an infrared reduction technique. An infrared reduction technology is not classified. It's not even a state secret type thing. Infrared reduction technology is used in many civilian programs and commercial enterprises, like home construction and lining chimneys and things like that. And the idea is, by using infrared coatings or infrared reducing coatings, you're reducing the amount of heat that a certain object is emitting, which of course is rather desirable in certain industrial circumstances. It's also desirable for an airplane that is a stealth fighter, because one of the weak points of a modern stealth fighter is, while it may be low observable to radar, radar is not the only way that a flying airplane can be tracked, right? Besides the good old-fashioned binoculars and eyeballs technique, you have infrared, meaning you're using a sensor which measures an object's heat, and an airplane inevitably has to give off heat. It's going to give off heat predictably in the back, where you have the engines that are spitting out very, very hot engine exhaust to make the airplane go. That's the part that you generally think about when it comes to heat suppression. And to some extent, that's already been done with some of the stealth aircraft out there. But the other part that has to be considered is that when an airplane flies in the air, it generates heat by friction. You know, the same friction that we all experience when it's a cold day and we rub our hands together to generate warmth. Anytime an airplane flies through the air, it's a physical thing. You don't necessarily see it, but you breathe it and you travel through it. And when you travel through it at hundreds of miles an hour, or hundreds of kilometers an hour, or hundreds of knots, whatever measurement you might think of it in, you're generating friction because the skin of the airplane is rubbing against the air. And just like your hands get warm on a cold day, the skin of an airplane gets warm when it's flying through the air. And that is not a good thing when you are trying to maintain a low observable sort of profile. And of course, not only do you not want an airplane to be tracked easily on an infrared sensor, like you would see on the latest generation of Russian and Chinese fighters like the Su-30, and even the US Navy is fielding infrared detection technology on their legacy Hornets, Super Hornets. So, you know, that's how key this sensor is becoming now in the world of stealth and electronic warfare and the like. And having the ability to reduce the infrared signature of an aircraft is very essential in the modern combat environment. So my hunch is what we're seeing with the reflective panels on the side and on the forward of the fuselage, on the forward half of the fuselage, all these reflective panels are designed to reduce the infrared signature when an airplane is flying through the air at high speed. So by not radiating as much heat, an infrared missile or infrared sensor is not going to get as easily of a tracking hit on a stealth airplane as it would were the finish something like this air superiority gray you have on the original F-22 Raptor. So that's my hunch, and I think that's why we're seeing the finish applied to the leading edges of the various parts, and why the back of the F-22 here is left in its normal finish, because at that point, an infrared missile is going to be probably aiming to the back of the airplane. It's going to be aiming to the jet exhaust. And in combination with the flares, which you all hopefully saw in the introduction segment, you know, if you have an F-22 that is coated in this technology and you try to shoot an infrared missile at it, it's probably not going to get a good solid lock, assuming the material is infrared reducing. And even if the infrared missile does see the heat of the aircraft in the back, it's going to point its seeker to where the heat is, which means instead of the missile going to the middle or the front of the airplane, which would be obviously a bad thing for whoever's flying it, the missile is going to look this way, and that's going to be easily decoyed by the flares and the jet exhaust coming from the back. And remember, the F-22 is thrust vectoring, so a missile trying to hit this thing is going to see just about everything except the rest of the airplane. So an infrared missile, I would suspect, is going to be much more easily decoyed in that case. And of course, a long-range infrared sensor, like what you might find on a Sukhoi Su-30 or Su-35 flanker, the Chinese variants of that airplane, as well as some of the European aircraft that have infrared sensors mounted, and then of course the infrared targeting pod and the infrared sensor that's mounted on the FA-18 Super Hornets. Having the infrared suppression on the front of the airplane would make it much harder to detect from long-range IR sensors, both in the air and on the ground. So that's my hunch. That's my theory of what that chrome mirror coating is and why they're testing it. Let me know again what you all think in the comments section of what you believe the Air Force is testing with this reflective skin. So that's the purpose of the real world aircraft, and it has lent itself to being a great display model, because obviously a chrome F-22 is just freaking cool. And honestly, I didn't think we would ever see anything this nice. Most F-22s that the Air Force produces are basically in this default color, air superiority gray, the end. The most creativity you might see is maybe some blue finish in the front by the canopy. I think they did a retro commemorative version celebrating Cripes Mighty because of Squadron heritage when the F-22 there was posted. I don't remember the unit offhand, but they painted the nose of the airplane blue, and that's basically about as creative as the Air Force gets with these F-22s. They generally all look pretty much the same as the Tyndall F-22 bird that you see in the background, gray, and that's it. So it's nice to see something different, and I don't suspect we're going to see another example of an F-22 in a unique color scheme again, which is something I'll circle back to once we get to the concluding thoughts. But I think it's nice that HobbyMaster did make a release of this, and despite it being a demonstration airplane for technology and new coding systems and stuff. So I, for one, am glad to have it, and hopefully when you get to the end of this review, you'll have some more info on whether you want to include this F-22 in your collection or not. There are some caveats I want to get to on this release, which is a great transition to what the model setup looks like. So overall, the paint finish looks pretty good. I'm glad to say that HobbyMaster did a very good job of balancing the reflectivity of the model with being shall I say practical, because matching the color of something like the test and evaluation F-22 is extremely difficult, and there weren't very many examples of footage. It's not like the Air Force gave a guided tour showcasing the F-22 in question from all angles. There was quite a bit of footage of it. I think people at Nellis just took some amateur photography of it, but for something like this, it's very difficult for a model maker to nail silver correctly. As somebody who's built a couple of silver models, it's a lot harder than you might think to get reflective silver right. And to do it on a mass production scale and not have it come out weird or too flaky or too grim or too shiny or some combination of those concerns is a good effort. And I'm glad to see that HobbyMaster clearly got it right with the finish here. I think it's pretty darn close to the actual color. It's not as reflective as I think the real one is, but I'm okay with it, because if they made it as reflective as the actual chrome test and evaluation F-22, you probably wouldn't be able to handle this. Like, if you touched it with anything other than gloved hands, you would just have fingerprints all over the place. And if you went to go dust it from having it on display, it would just be a nightmare to keep clean. So I'm kind of glad that they did tone down the brightness just a bit for practical reasons, but it is still a rather beautiful presentation. And I'm also glad to share that HobbyMaster got the accessory colors correct as well. One of my concerns when the pre-production photos came out was that the main model might look good, but then some of the panel doors and access bays wouldn't look correct, or maybe we would see one color for the main model, and then we would see a different color for the landing gear doors or the missile launch doors or some of the other panels. And I'm glad to share that the color schemes are very even. We don't see any mismatched paint or unusual color schemes or finishes. So no like weird dynamic where the model is a certain finish, but then this is darker or lighter or off color, or all the parts except the left landing gear are finished one way and this is finished something else. We don't see any uneven coatings or textures here, and I'm glad to share that it's all very consistent with this model. So rest assured, your panels and your parts are all the same color, at least on the one that I got. Hopefully that's the same for those of you that have ordered this as well. So good job, HobbyMaster, on that. Another point of kudos for HobbyMaster is how they did the small warning labels. So you see here where you have the danger and the canopy warning sign there. We have the 065 for the serial number here, and we have the warning labels and access port notifications and various components there. All of those parts are clearly defined. They're not washed out, miscolored, or done incorrectly. So they also kept the Nellis test and evaluation checker up here, which is a trademark, a historical trademark of the Nellis test range and the fighter wing out there. So I'm glad to see that they've carried that over. We don't see any misapplied parts or weird labels or anything of that sort. So the fuel door and the guidance labeling, I'm sure there's a more technical term, but the fuel door and then the guidance panels for the boomer to put the fuel receptacle in there are all done very well. And the antenna, as well as the parts that are in gray, are also not washed out or weird. So the radome, the small parts, and the antennae and various components, leading edges, and then the trailing edges are all done very well. So once again, I'm glad to see that HobbyMaster has nailed it with that. So the small parts, this is the part where we're probably going to get into some of the cons. The first thing to talk about is the canopy. Now, I've got my Tyndall F-22 in the background, and you notice that the canopy is, it looks the same as this one, but there is a very key difference. The canopy on the Tyndall release is built into the model. So when you want to display it open, you just press it up and then gently pull it forward, and then you can tilt it all the way back, and then you can present it with the canopy open. And when you want to close it, you just do the reverse, right? You push it closed and then tilt it a little back, and then just kind of snugly pops into place, and it's good to go. And I like that. It's straightforward, it's crisp, it's clean, echoes the real airplane, and you don't have any other fiddly bits. HobbyMaster has changed this with this release. I don't know if they have done this on other recent F-22 models. The Tyndall F-22 you see in the background, I bought like, I want to say 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and even then it had been out for some time. So I don't know if they made the change right afterward or if they did so in a few releases in between that one and this latest F-22. But now HobbyMaster has two different canopies. So much like how they do it with the F-35, where you have a closed canopy and a separate open canopy, that's how they've done it here. So they've taken away the built-in option to just open and close it within the model, and they now have two canopies, one that detaches in the open position and one that detaches and attaches in the closed position, which is what you see here. So I'm not sure why they did this. I don't see some dimensional issue or a problem between these F-22s that suggests that HobbyMaster is trying to fix something. I don't understand why they would go, to me, why they would go backwards and switch from an intuitive, very functional, integrated canopy like you see on the Tyndall F-22 here and go to a setup where you have to mess with popping off the canopy, and then you gotta fiddle it off the airplane and then get the other one and then fiddle it into place. I don't know why they did that, but they did it. So as far as appearances go, it doesn't look any different. To my eyes, it looks basically the same. So I'm not sure why they went with that approach, but that's what they've done with this F-22. Another thing to note is the side panels, which you see here for the AIM-9, as well as the panels for underneath, which house the missiles, and that's another thing we'll get to in a little bit. These panels are painted just like the outside finish. They're chrome silver, which presents a bit of a complication because when it's time to change the parts, for example, if you want to take the cover, it's just chrome here and shows it in the closed position, and you want to switch it to show the AIM-9X in the deployed position, you've got to be real careful because the original F-22, that's just a gray part. So it's a gray injection molded plastic part, so you can yank at it with the included HobbyMaster accessory key, and if it gets stuck, you don't necessarily have to worry about damaging the finish too much. But with this F-22, the accessories are extraordinarily, at least on mine, they're rather tight, and I didn't even want to change it. I was a little nervous changing the cover to do this video because I was concerned that I might either break the part off or I would bend it to the point where the chrome finish would crack or flake or malfunction, and obviously that's not something I want to do. So that's something I'll note. It's not a big deal to me because I don't change the parts that often on my models, but for doing these videos, I like to showcase everything that comes with it. And it's one of the reasons why in my outdoor segment, I did not show the parts open, because messing with that and then potentially breaking it during a shoot is not my idea of fun. So as I mentioned before, it's a little bit of some effort on my part to make these videos. And I did have an instance where I was shooting video for the J6 review where the model broke between me filming the introduction and me filming the review. Fortunately, I had filmed the review already. I was filming the introduction scenes, and then the model fell off the stand while I was trying to pose it, and that basically ruined any hope of getting later shots. Again, fortunately for me, I had the main review done, and I had 90% of my intro shots done, so I had to do a little more creative editing to get that through, but it did teach me a lesson in making sure that I don't change too much when I'm doing these shots, because that could have obviously ruined the video if that model had fallen off the stand and broke before I'd done any like reviews or done any major footage. So that's coming back to the F-22. That's something that I will point out, is that the small parts are extraordinarily snug. Again, there were parts where I was pulling off the covers thinking I was going to break them. So yeah, you might want to take a little sanding to the tab just to make sure that it doesn't break, because you don't want to bend the covers and then have the chrome finish that's so delightfully done get damaged or warped or broken in the process of changing those out. So the other thing to note is the loadout. You do get two AIM-9Xs on the side, which is of course par for the course with the F-22. And then each F-22 release seems to have a different combination of accessories. My Tyndall one came with an all AMRAAM loadout for the internal weapons bay, so you get 6 AMRAAMs in there. And then you have 2 external fuel tanks, which you probably can't see, but that's what this deal is right here. So you have 2 external fuel tanks, which they use for ferry purposes on the F-22. On this new F-22 release, this chrome one, you don't get that. There are no external fuel tanks. The spots under the wing to insert them are blocked off. So if you happen to have an F-22 already and you want to display your chrome F-22 with the ferry tanks, you do not have that option. And for the weapons bay, in the box you get 2 AMRAAMs and 2 JDAMs, which I'm not real keen on that. This is an air superiority fighter, and yes, JDAMs were integrated into the airplane. However, that was pretty much something that was done in the 20-something years ago to try to keep the airplane from being defunded, which wound up happening anyway because this is a air superiority fighter. It's designed to shoot down other airplanes, and General DePula's attempt to get this as air-to-ground airplane all came about because during the early 2000s we were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the one thing neither country really had at that point was an air force that we could shoot down. So here was the Air Force paying $100-something million for each F-22, and at that time, early 2000s or so, the production line was still going. So the F-22 Raptor was still in production. There were some budget debates about what the next step should be, and when Secretary Gates, Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, took office, initially at the later years of the Bush administration, he stayed on. Unusually enough for Secretary of Defense, he stayed on when Obama took over, and he made the decision to terminate the Raptor buy at 187 total airframes. So that decision has been debated to this day, and I imagine it will be debated as long as people value and care about airplane history. But long story short, U.S. Air Force General Robert Depula, I hope I get his name right there, spearheaded the effort to have the air-to-ground JDAM integrated with the F-22 to try to kind of work around the whole criticism of here the Air Force we're participating in these wars where there's no Air Force to actually shoot down. It's just a lot of ground combat, close air support, ground operations, counterinsurgency stuff. And that's just not what the F-22 is designed to do. So by putting the JDAM on the airplane, General Depula could go in front of the Congress and the media and say, hey, the F-22, it can help the ground troops because it has a gun and it can carry a bomb or two. It's kind of that idea of, hey, keep spending $100 million on this thing because, we might need it in a peer conflict, right? But that's a tough point to make when you're fighting two wars already. And you got troops that are, up armoring Humvees with scrap metal because they don't have any armor on their vehicles. The Air Force is trying to keep the F-22 in production, and they couldn't just get in front of a microphone and say, hey, we might need to shoot down some Chinese stealth fighters someday. Not really a good sales pitch. So the air-to-ground weapon was integrated, and they called it the F-A-22 briefly. Obviously, when the F-22 buy was canceled and General Depula and T. Michael Mosley and some of the other fans of the airplane retired, once those people left the senior Air Force ranks, the F-A-22 and that whole effort was properly binned, and the F-22 was, of course, redesignated just F-22 because it is an air superiority fighter at the end of the day. And if you couldn't convince Congress this was an air-to-ground airplane, you're not convincing anybody else. So the Hill saw through that attempt, and the F-22 is properly referred to as the F-22. So this is an air superiority airplane, and it should have an air superiority loadout. I would not be upset if they didn't include any JDAMs in the kit, but there should be an option for 6 AMRAAMs in here, and I feel like that's a missed opportunity for HobbyMaster on this release. They could have just kept 6 AMRAAMs in the center, and then you have your 2 AIM-9s, and that would have been ideal to me. So what are your guys' thoughts? I'm curious to know, what do y'all put in your F-22 displays? Do you display it with the bays closed? Do you put the JDAMs in there, or do you have all air-to-air? Because that's how I would display mine. I generally don't keep my weapons bays open when I display my models, but if I did, I would not put air-to-ground weaponry in the airplane. That's just how I roll. So on that note, the other thing to note about the paint finish before we conclude is that it's very smooth. And that's good because, of course, that's what the real airplane has going for it and all that. But that does mean if you use a stand that's not the included HobbyMaster stand, you might have some challenges positioning the model because the slickness of the finish, where it's chrome, means if you put the model on a stand and it has like a friction fit deal, like the tripod stands that I use for my introduction footage, you might have some challenges getting the model on there right. I'm not saying you can't do it, it's possible, but it's very slick, so you want to make sure that you pose it in a way that it's not just going to slide off of the feet of the router style stand. Okay, it's not a big deal, but it is something to be aware of if you're somebody who displays your models in flight and you want to use a aftermarket stand instead of the HobbyMaster one that it comes with. So with that, we will conclude today's review. I'm curious to hear what you all think of the model, for those of you that have bought it. I imagine this is not going to be a release that's going to be on sale very long, which is why I'm turning this video around relatively quickly, because I can imagine this one is going to sell out fast. If you're watching this in proximity to late summer of 2023, I would highly recommend that you order this immediately because this is going to sell out. The dealer that I purchased this from already is down to the last quantity, and I don't imagine that the first and potentially only chrome silver F-22 release is going to be missed by many people. So don't wait. If you plan on getting this model, there are some minor things to consider, but all things on the plate, on the table here, I would say order it. Get it now, because if you wait much longer, you're probably going to be paying a premium to get it. And I can easily see this being one of those F-22s that in a year's time is selling for double the retail price right now. So again, don't wait. If you're watching this in proximity to summer 2023, if you have to sell something to make it work, I'm pretty confident you can get whatever you sell back down the line a lot easier than you can get one of these if you don't jump on them now. So availability right now, it's not a con, but I would imagine in a year's time or potentially less, availability of this is going to be really hard. Nobody's going to really want to sell them. It's going to be like that F-16 that Caliber Wings did, the first wave F-16s. I haven't seen a Shaw F-16 from the first wave come up for sale in a long time, and I don't blame the people that have them, because that's lightning in a bottle. I think this is going to be one of those releases as well. So with that, we will wrap today's video. I thank you all for your time and for patronizing the channel, watching my content. And for those of you who are new, I make occasional videos of 1/72nd scale military models in my collection. I'm an Air Force veteran that wants to share stories related to these 1/72nd scale models, because combat airplanes are not islands of one, so to speak. They are stories that involve people who build them, make them, maintain them, fly them. Obviously, the people that fly them get the press, but there's a whole ecosystem of people that are involved whenever one of these airplanes is built and flown, and it's their stories that I like to share alongside reviews of 1/72nd scale models. So if you like this video, I invite you to check out my other content on the channel. And if there is something that you want to see, let me know in the comment section below. And if you like my other videos and want to be notified when I release a new one, consider subscribing. That way you can click the bell icon and be notified when I have a new video uploaded, and you can see the reviews of the models in my collection. And I'll also stress here that all of the models I have on the channel at this point are all mine. So they are not reviews, they're not samples from manufacturers or given to me by retailers. I do not have a retail shop. These are all my personal 1/72nd scale models in my collection, and I've paid my own money to review them. So what you're hearing are the impressions of somebody who has ordered these just like anyone else. So there's no sponsored content, no ad deals, no money men lurking behind the camera to slide me favors and money and all those sorts of things to tell you a preconceived marketing opinion. This is all from someone who has, just like you, paid their own money to get them. So once again, I will extend my appreciation for those of you who have subscribed to the channel and are watching my videos, including this one, and we will catch you all in the next one.